Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Julie Pettyjohn. Sometimes I do free motion and sometimes I do ProStitcher, a little bit of everything, but today we are going to talk about how to set up a border and then an inside edge-to-edge design. If anything on here helps you at all, please give me a like and a subscribe. It really helps me with YouTube. I appreciate it very much. This is the quilt that we're designing for today. It was pieced by my customer, Sarah. I have already brought the elements into ProStitcher Premium that Sarah chose for her quilt. The inside is going to be Soft and Sweet Border to Border by Anne Bright. And the first thing I notice is that I need to flip this design because I want my start and my stop to be at the top. And I didn't have to do that first, but I just saw it, wanted to take care of it. Now for her border, she chose crested crane border and corner that I purchased from Quiltable. This is how I get all my designs ready to take to the quilt. So the first thing I'm going to do is choose area. And I have taken measurements of my top border, and so that's what I am using. And I'm not editing this. I'm going to show you how I started it because I need to change my measurements a little bit later here, and I'll explain to you why. But rather than just putting everything perfect, I want to show you here's how I do it, and here's how I make changes if I need to. So I put the measurement for my border. I know it's 6 inches in height and I have my width here. So I'm aligning this to the left and the center. And then I zoom in to see that a little bit better. And I know I'm going to have to repeat that. But then I realize, hey, wait a minute. Okay, this is the whole entire top area I need for my border, and I'm putting corners in. So I'm going to do some math here, and my corners are 6-inch square. So I'm going to take 12 inches off of this measurement that I have. Now, I could have left it just as it is, and I could have put the corners within that space and tried to fit it, but I need to let ProStitcher do some work for me and do some stretching and filling here in a minute. So I prefer to just do all that within the area where just the border is going to be. So I change my width of my border. And now that I've done that, I just for the sake of eyeballing it and just kind of seeing what it's looking like, I'm going to go ahead and put that corner piece next to that area because I just want to see it. And then I duplicate it because I'll have it over at the side, at the other side. And now I'm going to select the piece for the border and I'm going to go to repeat. And I want to repeat it horizontally. And right in here I was just thinking about, well, I could have put the corner within the space and left my measurements the same as I described a while ago, but I'm working it out and thinking, no, this is the better way to do it. So now I go to repeat. I'm going to have to select the border piece again and repeat that horizontally, 2 and 3, and I need 4 of those elements. And then I've got a little situation. I do not want to add a 5th one because I'll show you what would happen. If I add a 5th one, then I'm going to have to crop. And here's the problem. It just, I don't want a line. I don't want part of a design. I want the whole thing. So stretch is the better idea there. So I can just click stretch and get that how I want it. And then I'm going to need to baseline that. And then I want to save that. And this is how I get all of my elements saved so they're just near perfect when I go to the quilt. And I was having trouble with my computer and it was just running slow. It was just one of those days. I clicked on save several times and it just wasn't wanting to perform that next task. Maybe I should have just restarted and all, but I just chose to wait around here, get the computer working for me. There we go. So I'm going to save the selected, not the workspace or the area. I just want to save that top border. Again, the computer doesn't quite want to accept selected. So you have to be patient with me just a minute. There we go. So I'm going to save this to my flash drive that I'm going to take over to the computer. And I have a working folder on that flash drive. But when I look, I've got several things in there. And since I'm going to have more than one element and I don't want to hunt around all over the flash drive, I'm going to create a new folder with Sarah's name so I can put everything in there, and then I'll find all of those pieces easier. So I select the folder, and now I'm within the folder Sarah, but I'm not seeing a save. Oh, now I remember. I was just going in and making a new folder, looking around there, but that's not the way we do it, is it? No, we want our screen to look like this. Okay, so now I need to go and find my F drive. There we go. And I have made a Sarah folder. It's right down there, so I'm going to click on the Sarah folder, and here's where I save it. But I do not want this saved as repeated crested crane, so I'm going to clear that, and I'm going to save this for something that, something that makes sense to me, top and bottom border, because I'm going to use that both on the top and the bottom. So now I've got that saved. I'm going to select one of the corners, and I'm going to save that as corners. I don't need to, save 4 of them. I will just place one at a time. But now I know I have my piece that I need for corners, and I have my piece that I will need for the top and bottom border. And I get to thinking, well, what I'm planning to do is, after I've done the top and bottom and the inside, I'm going to take the quilt off and turn it. But I might as well go ahead and get my side borders ready. So I've got to go check on some measurements and make sure I've got the measurements. They're not going to be exact because I've already loaded this quilt, you saw by the photograph. But I can look at the measurements that I took of this quilt. I knew the quilt was 60 by 75. So this doesn't have to be exact, because once I get to the quilt, if it's pretty close, I can skew the border and from there, and it'll be great. So I'm going to take 75, that I know is the length of my quilt, and I'm going to subtract 12 inches because, I have 2 6-inch borders there, and that gives me 63. And then I'm going to need to leave about a 1/2 inch top and bottom, so I'm going to subtract another 1 inch, making that 62. So I am going to make my width here 62 by 6. That's the height of the design. Okay, I'm going to take the elements that are in here, and I'm just dragging them off of that area box that I just made. I could have moved the area box instead, but there's always several ways to do this. I'm going to skip over the part where I made and saved the side border, since I did that just like I did the top border. And I'm going to show you this picture of what the top border with corners looks like after I stitched it out. So once I'd made everything and taken all my design elements to the long arm, I stitched out the first corner, and I made an area, stitched and put the first corner in it and stitched it out. Then made my area for the top border, placed it, skewed it, stitched it out, and then did the same thing again for the second corner. And this time, though, I rotated the corner so that they would, instead of facing the same direction, I want them like pointing out, if that makes any sense. I hope that does. But anyway, I just want the corners to look slightly different. So the right side will be pointing out, the left side is pointing out to the left, the right side is kind of pointing out to the right. Then next, when I'm at the long arm, I won't even worry about that side border. I could chunk it if I wanted to, but I'm not going to. I've created the full side border. So this time, I'm just going to, from now on, be concerned with stitching out the inside edge-to-edge design, which I often call pantograph. Pantograph is an old-fashioned word, really, when we used to use paper designs and kind of trace over them. This is a digitized, computerized design instead of a pantograph, but a lot of us still use the word pantograph, so you'll hear me sometimes say my inside panto. So the inside edge-to-edge design is what I'll do next, and then when that's all completed, then I will take the quilt off, turn it, and do my side borders as if they are new top and new bottom border. So let me go back to ProStitcher and show you how I prepared that inside edge-to-edge design. Here I have my top and bottom border, and then underneath that is the side border that I'll use on both sides. So I go to area and I clear that area. And I'm going to need to make a new area for the inside edge-to-edge. So I'm going to select two corner, and I'm going to put in 47.5 because I know the inside measurement of my quilt is 47.5 inches wide. Now for the height, I'm just going to put in my usual 30 or 35. That's what I always make my area. I don't do the entire quilt. I just do enough for me to work with. I don't have time to see the pretty picture. Seeing a third of the quilt, I can imagine what the entire quilt's going to look like. So I take my inside design and place it in there. And the neat thing about this design is it's a border to border, not an edge to edge, which means it lines up very well on the left side, on the right side, on the top. You know, I don't have anything dipping down and where I'll have empty space. Everything is pretty squared off. But I want to think about how I'm going to stitch that out. Do I want it that size? Do I want it smaller? A lot of the times I don't know until I get over to the quilt. And what I usually do is I will go over to the quilt, and then I will select stitch so that, as you can see on the right side, all of those, the green goes off, and that allows me to air stitch and kind of see the size. But what I'm doing here is I'm kind of laying this out just to give me a little idea of density of the borders and corners versus the inside design, because as you can see, they don't really match up. I don't think. The inside is bigger, it's larger, and they don't look like they go together. So this is another way that I can get an idea. Now if I get over to the quilt and it doesn't look right, then I'm going to have to make some adjustments there and maybe start over on the inside. But I like to do this when I'm doing a different inside edge to edge. So I'm looking at these, I select them all so they're all dark, and I can really see that it's just way too large on the inside. So I'm going to lock my aspect ratio and make this smaller until it starts looking a little bit better with it. And as you can see too, the sizing is just a lot better. size of this, when I make it just even slightly smaller, kind of fits in with where it starts and ends more with the design. That's one thing to consider. It doesn't have to, but I'm just kind of looking at all the elements there. So I'm going to save this as the Soft and Sweet resized. It's really important that you do this. It seems like a lot of saving to do, but if I get over to the quilt and the things I've put together don't look right, I might want to go back to that original one that I worked with, and I won't have it saved. If I've baselined, I'm not going to be able to take off my repeats and get back to this. So I'm saving the resized. So I'm going to repeat this and see kind of how it ends up. Repeating it 2 times, 3 times, 4. Uh-oh. So here again, it doesn't quite end up. So I can stretch, but I'm not sure I like that because it distorts the image. So I tried to deselect stretch and see if it would go back, and I'm not quite sure why it wasn't going back. So I decide, well, I haven't baselined yet, so I can just take off the parts. I go to try, I'm just showing you here, like, or I'm kind of testing around actually with that stretch element, and no, it's just staying. So what's best to do is I just go back, and I have my resized piece. So already it's a good thing that I saved that, because I could just bring that right back in and then delete the other one that I was, the one that had gotten distorted. So now I've got to decide, what am I going to do about this? Am I going to make it larger? Again, see, I really didn't like that before. I made it smaller. So I'm going to make it even smaller to see if that will allow me to get like an extra repeat in there. So you just kind of have to play around with it a little bit. But these are some of the things that you come up against. So I have resized this again, so I'm saving this one as resized 2. Anytime I have a number on something, I know the higher number was the last one saved. So now I'm going to go back and try this repeat again and see where it lands me. Here is an important tip. Stretch not only will make your design bigger, but if it's too big, it will make it smaller. So if you're not liking how it looks when you hit the stretch button, when you have a gap there and some space, then try adding one more repeat and then selecting stretch, and it will take it down, because sometimes making it smaller makes it look a lot better, and that's what I ended up doing here. So as I put on there, if stretching when there is space doesn't look good, then try adding one more and then select stretch. I'm adding my vertical rows here, and I did not have to close up a gap. There wasn't any space in between the vertical rows. So that was good. And I'm putting it at different sizes so I can see the density comparison from the border to the inside. And to me, this just looks a whole lot better than it did at the original size. So I wanted to explain to you what I was talking about before. If we cropped, where, when I'm doing just a full edge to edge, I crop because I'm cropping out into the batting. It doesn't matter. But here, you do not want to crop, because what will happen is, as you do row 2 and row 3, row 4, if the quilt is not perfectly square, and no quilt really is, then you're going to get crop marks in there. That just does not look good at all. So I have now baselined this, this whole inside edge to edge, and I'm calling this Soft and Sweet B2B Panto. I explained a while ago that I often use the word panto. I know what that means. If you don't use that and like it, then don't use that to save things for, your own elements. Use something that makes sense to you. But to me, I use the word panto a lot, so I know that's going to be my inside pantograph. Here are a few photographs to show you what that inside pantograph looks like. It's really pretty when it fits in so nicely. Now I took a little bit of video towards the end of the first pass, and I wanted to show you. Let's see what happened right there. Got just a little bit out into the border. So if that happens to you, and it especially can happen like third, fourth, fifth row, if the quilt is just the way it's positioned, or if it's not square, whatever. So you want to kind of check each pass and take your machine over towards the right, the far side where your stitches are, and line it up and see if it looks like it's going to go over in the border to you. So what I did with this one is I just selected the entire pantograph and I went to resize, and I took that width in just a couple of touches to my left arrow, and that made it just slightly smaller, not enough to tell at all, and that did the trick for the second row. It looked just perfect. So I hope that helps you. Once again, please subscribe and like, and thank you for joining me.